Hello, and welcome. Get ready to dive into a captivating tale that challenges societal norms, explores the depths of human resilience, and uncovers the quiet strength of two people from worlds apart. Beyond the Glass Wall is more than a story. It's a journey of ambition, connection, and the courage to rise above the whispers of doubt. Imagine standing in a gleaming glass tower overlooking a city that never sleeps. Now picture the invisible barriers between power and struggle, privilege and perseverance, shattering with a single act of courage. In this story, a powerful CEO and a janitor with untapped potential collide in a way that will change both their lives and their world forever. Are you ready to find out what happens when ambition meets humility and when love defies all odds? The city skyline sparkled in the crisp evening air, the towering skyscrapers of Manhattan standing like silent sentinels over the bustling streets below. In the heart of it all, Prescott Enterprises' headquarters loomed, a sleek glass structure that mirrored the ambition and power of those who worked within its walls. At the top floor, Katherine Prescott, CEO of one of the country's most successful investment firms, strode into her office. Her designer heels clicked against the polished marble floors, echoing through the space. The day had been grueling, with endless meetings and a heated argument in the boardroom over a risky acquisition she had pushed through. She was looking forward to a moment of solitude to review reports and sip her favorite Merlot. But as she stepped inside, she froze. There, standing by her desk, was a man she didn't recognize. He was dressed in a janitor's uniform, a spray bottle in one hand and a cloth in the other, carefully polishing the glass surface of her expansive desk. Her first instinct was annoyance. Her office was supposed to be cleared by now, but as she watched him, irritation melted into curiosity. His movements were deliberate, almost reverent, as though cleaning her desk was an art form. He hadn't noticed her yet, his head slightly bowed, and she took the opportunity to study him. He was tall and lean, his dark skin glowing under the soft light of the desk lamp. There was a quiet dignity in his posture, an unexpected grace that intrigued her. When he finally looked up and saw her, his eyes widened, and he stood awkwardly, his hand lingering over the cleaning supplies. I'm sorry, ma'am," he stammered, his deep voice resonating with a mix of embarrassment and respect. "I didn't think anyone was still here." "It's fine," Katherine said, recovering quickly. Her tone was measured, but her curiosity lingered. "I wasn't expecting anyone either." He nodded, taking a step back as though preparing to leave. "I'll get out of your way." "No need," she said, stopping him. "What's your name?" He hesitated, his gaze meeting hers briefly, before darting away. Marcus Hill." "Well, Marcus," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "You're very thorough." "Just doing my job, ma'am," he replied quietly. As he gathered his supplies, she noticed a folded piece of paper on the floor near her desk. Before she could think better of it, she bent down and picked it up. It was a hospital bill, its bold lettering indicating an overdue balance. Her eyes flicked back to Marcus, who had turned toward the door. "Marcus," she said, holding up the paper, "you dropped this." His face tightened as he took it from her, his voice clipped. "Thank you." As he left, Katherine couldn't shake the image of the hospital bill or the weight in his gaze. That night, Katherine sat in her penthouse, the vast space around her suddenly feeling suffocating. The shimmering city skyline was a testament to her accomplishments. Yet tonight, it seemed to mock her. Her glass of wine sat untouched as she stared at the pile of contracts on the table. Her thoughts drifted back to Marcus, his quiet humility, the careful way he spoke. She hadn't missed the way he flinched when she handed him the hospital bill. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was something heavier, a burden he seemed to carry silently. She glanced at the framed photo on the wall of her mother, Margaret Prescott, holding a young Katherine in her lap. Her mother's smile was tired but radiant, and Katherine could almost smell the faint traces of lavender and sweat that always clung to her after a double shift at the diner. Her mother had fought for her and worked herself to the bone so Katherine could attend private schools, wear the best clothes, and eventually climb her way to the top. But what had Katherine done with it? She had built an empire, yes. But when was the last time she had connected with someone outside of boardrooms and luxury dinner parties? The thought unsettled her. She turned her attention to her laptop, pulling up the company's employee database. Typing Marcus Hill into the search bar, she hesitated before pressing enter. When his profile appeared, she scanned it quickly. Bachelor's degree in finance from QNY, internships at mid-level firms. Why is he working as a janitor? Katherine frowned. Whatever had brought him to this point, she realized, wasn't a lack of ability. It was something else entirely. The fluorescent lights of the hospital were harsh, casting an unnatural glow over the room where Evelyn Hill lay. Marcus sat beside her, her frail hand dwarfed in his strong grip. "Marcus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you've got to stop running yourself ragged." He forced a smile. "I'm fine, Mama. Don't worry about me." But Evelyn wasn't fooled. Her sharp eyes dimmed but still piercing, and narrowed. "You've been taking on too much. I see it in your face, the way you carry yourself. You're too young to look so tired." Marcus's throat tightened. He didn't have the heart to tell her that his exhaustion went beyond the long hours at work. It was the weight of watching her struggle, the machines, the bills piling up, the helplessness of knowing he couldn't fix everything. His gaze drifted to the corner of the room where an old photo sat on the windowsill. It was a picture of his mother, young and vibrant, standing outside their small apartment with Marcus as a boy. Her apron was dusted with flour, and she held a loaf of bread she had baked after working a double shift at the bakery. Marcus's chest tightened. He remembered that day clearly. She had saved her tips to buy the ingredients, insisting on baking him a cake for his 8th birthday. The cake had been lopsided and a little burnt, but it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. "Marcus," Evelyn's voice pulled him back to the present. "Promise me something." "What is it, Mama?" "Promise me you'll live your life," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "Find your own happiness. You've already given me more than I could have ever asked for." Marcus looked away, the words hitting him like a blow. How could he live for himself when she had given up everything for him? The break room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Marcus leaned against the counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the ancient machine that sputtered and hissed indignantly with each pour. His shoulders were tense. He was always on guard in spaces like this, where he felt both invisible and hypervisible at once. As he stirred in the powdered creamer, the door swung open. Katherine Prescott stepped inside, her heels clicking against the tile floor. Marcus froze, instinctively straightening his posture. This wasn't her usual domain. Executives like her rarely ventured into the break room. She caught sight of him and offered a warm smile. "Marcus." He nodded quickly. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clipped, as if the single syllable could shield him from whatever awkwardness was about to unfold. She tilted her head slightly, her expression amused. "You don't have to call me that. It's Katherine." He hesitated. "Right. Katherine," he said, the name feeling unfamiliar on his tongue, like something he didn't have permission to say aloud. For a moment, neither spoke. Katherine moved to the counter and poured herself a cup of coffee. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but charged with an energy neither could name. "You take your coffee black?" she asked, glancing at the murky liquid in his cup. He nodded. "Yeah, keeps me awake." "Long nights?" she asked, her tone light but curious. "Something like that," he said vaguely, not wanting to delve into his life. He took a sip, grateful for the excuse not to say more. But Katherine didn't seem put off by his brevity. She leaned slightly against the counter, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I've been working here for over a decade, and I think this might be the first time I've really spoken to someone in this break room." Marcus raised an eyebrow, unsure if it was a joke. "I guess executives don't need bad coffee," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. She laughed softly. "No, we just suffer through the overpriced stuff upstairs." It was the first time he'd seen her laugh, really laugh, and something about it unsettled him. She didn't seem like the untouchable CEO he'd imagined. She seemed human. The office had always been a place of whispers, of stories spun in quiet corners and break rooms. It didn't take long for rumors about Katherine and Marcus to begin circulating. It started with fleeting glances, a few employees noticing Katherine's friendly tone when she greeted Marcus or the way she lingered in conversations with him. The narrative wrote itself. "Have you noticed the boss spending time with the janitor?" one intern whispered to another as they passed the break room. "I bet she's just trying to prove she's down to earth," the other replied, their tone dripping with cynicism. "Rich people love their little projects." By the time the rumors reached Meredith, Katherine's assistant, they had taken on a life of their own. Meredith hesitated for a day before deciding to bring it up. She knocked gently on Katherine's office door, stepping inside when Katherine waved her in. "Got a minute?" Katherine looked up from her laptop. "What's on your mind?" Meredith hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the corner of her notepad. "I wanted to let you know, people have started to notice. About you and Marcus." Katherine's expression sharpened, though her tone remained calm. "Notice what?" "The way you've been interacting with him," Meredith said, choosing her words carefully. "It's unusual, that's all." For a moment, Katherine didn't respond. Then she set her laptop aside and leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. "And what exactly are they saying?" Meredith hesitated, unsure of how far to push. "You know how people talk. They're just curious." Katherine's lips pressed into a thin line. "Let them talk," she said firmly, dismissing Meredith with a nod. But as the door closed behind her assistant, Katherine felt a flicker of unease. In the maintenance department, the whispers were less cautious. Marcus had become a subject of quiet ridicule among some of his co-workers. "She's probably just slumming it," said Pete, an older janitor with a cynical grin. "Rich people love to feel like they're helping someone out." "Or maybe she's looking for a new charity project," another chimed in. "Poor guy doesn't even see it." Marcus overheard the comments as he entered the locker room, his jaw tightening. He wanted to say something, to defend himself, to defend her, but the words stuck in his throat. Confrontation wouldn't help, but the whispers followed him everywhere. In the break room, in the hallways, in the subtle glances cast his way when Katherine stopped to say hello. He began to question everything, her kindness, her interest, even her sincerity. That night, lying on the worn couch in his small apartment, he stared at the cracked ceiling, his thoughts racing. Was he just a project to her? Was she trying to make herself feel better by helping the janitor with the sad backstory? And yet, there was something about the way she spoke to him, the way she looked at him, that felt genuine. As the days passed, the tension grew. Marcus tried to avoid Katherine, but it was impossible to ignore her completely, and Katherine, sensing his distance, began to wonder if she had overstepped. The whispers, the stares, the unspoken judgments, they were suffocating, pressing down on both of them in different ways. When the promotion to facilities manager was announced, the weight of the rumors intensified. While some congratulated Marcus, their words rang hollow. Facilities manager, huh? Pete sneered into the locker room. Bet you never thought you'd be climbing the ladder that fast. Marcus forced a smile, but inside his doubts churned. Was he really earning his place, or was he just a pawn in someone else's game? Later that evening, Marcus stormed into Katherine's office after hours, his jaw tight and his hands clenched at his sides. She was seated at her desk, reviewing documents, but her attention shifted to him immediately. "Marcus," she said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd come by." "Why did you do it?" he demanded, his voice more forceful than he intended. "Why did you promote me?" Katherine's brow furrowed. "Because you deserve it." "Do I?" he challenged. "Or is this just some way to make yourself feel better? To play the hero?" Her expression hardened. "Do you really think that's what this is about?" "What else could it be?" he shot back. "I'm a janitor, Katherine. That's how everyone sees me." She stood, her voice firm but measured. "And what about how I see you? Did you ever stop to consider that I might see more in you than you see in yourself?" He opened his mouth to respond, but faltered, her words striking a nerve. "You have a degree in finance," she continued. "You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you have integrity, something that's hard to come by in this business. I promoted you because you're capable, Marcus, because you've earned it." He looked away, his jaw tightening. "You don't know what it's like to be me, to feel like every step forward is a fight. And now people think I'm just a charity case." Katherine stepped closer, her voice softening. "Then prove them wrong. Show them who you really are." The sound of the hospital machines beeped faintly in the background as Katherine sat beside Evelyn Hill. She felt out of place, her tailored suit and polished demeanor stark against the worn chair and the faint smell of antiseptic that filled the room. Evelyn adjusted herself slightly in bed, her frail frame barely shifting under the thin blanket. But her sharp eyes remained fixed on Katherine, assessing her with the kind of quiet wisdom that only years of struggle could bring. "So," Evelyn began, her voice soft but steady, "what's someone like you doing in a place like this?" Katherine blinked, unsure how to respond. "I came to check on you," she said cautiously. "I wanted to meet you. Marcus. He talks about you a lot." Evelyn let out a soft chuckle, though it quickly turned into a cough. Katherine instinctively reached out, but Evelyn waved her off. "That boy, always thinking he can handle everything himself. Never wants to burden anyone, even when the weight's breaking his back." Katherine leaned forward. "He's remarkable. The way he works, his dedication, it's inspiring." Evelyn studied her closely. "And yet you're still here, sitting in this room, in this rundown hospital. Why?" The question struck Katherine harder than she expected. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unsure of how to articulate what she was feeling. "I care about him," she admitted finally, her voice quieter. "I don't know how else to explain it. He's different. He makes me see things I hadn't before." Evelyn's gaze softened, but her words were no less direct. "Caring isn't enough, Katherine. Not in this world, not for someone like Marcus. The minute you step outside this room, people are going to judge you both. They'll question your motives, his worth. They'll say things that'll hurt him more than they'll hurt you." Katherine swallowed hard. "I don't care what people think." "Then you'll have to prove it," Evelyn said, her voice tinged with both challenge and encouragement. "Because if you're not ready to fight for him, to fight with him, you're only going to make it harder." The weight of Evelyn's words settled heavily on Katherine's chest. She looked at the older woman, whose strength radiated despite her frailty, and saw the life Marcus had been protecting. "Thank you," Katherine said softly. Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes closing as she leaned back into her pillow. "You've got a fire in you," she murmured. "Just make sure it's bright enough for the both of you." Back in her office, Katherine stared at Marcus's personnel file on her laptop screen. His degree, his internships, and his spotless work record stared back at her, a stark reminder of potential left unrealized. "Why is it so hard for others to see what I do?" she thought, scrolling through his employment history. She leaned back in her chair, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "If you see someone worth believing in, don't just stand by. Help them." It wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It was about redefining what leadership looked like and who deserved a chance to lead. The boardroom was silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. The Prescott Enterprises executives sat in their leather chairs, their faces a mix of curiosity and impatience as Katherine stood at the head of the long, gleaming table. She had called this meeting personally, a rarity that immediately heightened the stakes. Normally, Katherine's announcements came through carefully worded memos or her assistant. Today, she wanted no intermediaries. "As many of you know," Katherine began, her voice steady, "this company has thrived because of the talent and dedication of its people, from the top executives to those who keep our offices running day and night." There were murmurs of agreement, though some executives exchanged glances, clearly unsure where this was going. "It's easy to overlook the contributions of those who don't sit at this table," Katherine continued, her gaze sweeping the room. "But the truth is, they're just as integral to our success." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That's why I've decided to appoint a new chief operating officer, someone who embodies hard work, integrity, and a deep understanding of what it means to lead by example." The murmurs grew louder, curiosity turning to confusion. A few executives leaned forward in their chairs, visibly bracing themselves for a surprise. Katherine took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she delivered the next words. "Effective immediately, Marcus Hill will assume the role of COO." The room erupted in shocked whispers. "Marcus Hill?" one executive said incredulously. "The janitor?" Another leaned back in their chair, a skeptical smirk playing on their lips. "Is this some kind of publicity stunt?" Katherine's expression didn't waver. "It's a strategic decision," she said firmly. "Marcus has a degree in finance and first-hand knowledge of the challenges our employees face at every level. His perspective will be invaluable as we move forward." "Does he even have the experience for this?" a particularly vocal board member demanded. Katherine fixed him with a steely gaze. "He has the experience that matters most: perseverance, integrity, and the ability to see people for who they truly are. Qualities this company could use more of." The room fell into a tense silence, but Katherine stood her ground. Later that evening, Marcus stood outside Katherine's office, staring at the plaque with her name on it. He had received the news hours ago, and the weight of it hadn't fully settled. He knocked once, then pushed the door open. Katherine was at her desk, her hands folded as she looked up at him. "Marcus," she said warmly. He stepped inside but didn't sit. "Why did you do this?" he asked, his voice low. Her brow furrowed. "Do what?" "Put me in this position," he said. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? They think I don't deserve it, that you're just trying to make a statement." She stood and walked around the desk to face him. "Do you think you don't deserve it?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I don't know." "Then let me be clear," she said, her voice steady. "I didn't promote you to prove a point. I promoted you because you're the most capable person for the job, and because I trust you to help me take this company somewhere it's never been before." Marcus searched her face, his emotions warring between doubt and something else, something closer to hope. "I'm not going to let you down," he said finally. Katherine smiled, her eyes softening. "I know you won't." The next morning, the company buzzed with the aftermath of Katherine's decision. Articles circulated, headlines speculated, and employees whispered. Some praised her boldness, others accused her of recklessness. And Marcus, as always, found himself caught in the middle. As he walked through the halls, the stares were sharper than ever. Some were skeptical, others resentful. A few, though, held a glimmer of admiration. Pete, the cynic from the maintenance team, leaned against a cart as Marcus passed. "Well, well," Pete drawled, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Big boss man now, huh?" Marcus stopped. "That's right," he said evenly. "And I'm starting with reviewing contracts for new maintenance equipment." Pete's grin faltered and Marcus moved on. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. Meanwhile, Katherine faced her own challenges. During a press interview later that week, a reporter pressed her on her decision. "Critics say your appointment of Marcus Hill is a publicity stunt, given his background. What do you say to that?" Katherine didn't flinch. "I say those critics should focus less on his background and more on his accomplishments. Marcus Hill's potential has been overlooked for too long. Not because he lacked the ability, but because people couldn't see past their own assumptions. That changes now." That evening, Katherine invited Marcus to dinner at a quiet restaurant uptown. The tension of the past few days lingered between them, but so did a sense of something new. Possibility. "You know," Marcus said, swirling the wine in his glass, "I've spent most of my life trying to avoid attention, and now, thanks to you, I'm in the spotlight whether I like it or not." Katherine met his gaze. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head slowly. "No, but I'm not sure I deserve it." Her expression softened. "Marcus, you deserve everything you've worked for. You've earned it. And the world is finally starting to see that." He hesitated, then asked, "And why did you really do it? Was it just business?" She smiled faintly. "It was business, but it was also personal. You made me see something I'd forgotten, that leadership is about more than power or position. It's about people." Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You know, you're not what I expected." "Neither are you," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. Weeks turned into months, and Marcus grew into his new role. The whispers faded, replaced by nods of respect. Katherine, too, found herself more connected to her company and to the people who kept it running. One evening, as they stood in her office reviewing a presentation, Marcus glanced at the glass walls surrounding them. For the first time, they didn't feel like barriers. Instead, they were a reminder of how far he had come and how much further he could go. Katherine smiled at him, her confidence steady and unwavering. "This is just the beginning," she said softly. And for the first time, Marcus believed her. Together, they looked out at the city beyond the glass, ready to face whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this journey beyond the glass walls. This is more than just a story about ambition or romance. It's a testament to the strength it takes to break barriers, challenge perceptions, and believe in potential where others see limits. Katherine and Marcus remind us that true leadership and connection come from courage, integrity, and the willingness to defy the odds. As their story shows, sometimes the most meaningful change begins when we dare to see beyond the surface and embrace the possibilities on the other side of the glass. Until next time, keep believing in the power of resilience, connection, and transformation.